G'day, I'm Owen. You've joined the pub test, and in this one we are looking at the true crime case of the high country killer, Greg Lynn. Now, just letting you know, this has gone to trial. A jury has given a verdict, and I find the verdict quite surprising, as did many people. You'll have to hang around to the end to see what the jury said about this case. But what is the story? Well, it made a lot of media attention, this particular case. But just to set the scene, this happened in 2020. Now, Victoria, like many states in Australia during COVID, closed the borders. They became little mini fortresses, those imaginary lines on the map. Something that you never used to think about driving past them. All of a sudden, it was a challenge to move around Australia. And Victoria, and particularly Melbourne, was known as the lockdown capital of the world, probably the most locked down city outside of China. So when some restrictions, and they soon returned, but some restrictions were removed in 2020, if you enjoy the outdoors, like I do, you can check out some of the shorts on this channel and you see that I quite enjoy going out into the scrub, the bush as we call it in Australia. Well, so did this couple, and they'd often done trips together out camping in this high country of Victoria. I have not been there myself, but it's a great spot if you want to get away from everything. You can go hunting if you're into that. You can go stargazing, or if you just want some peace and quiet, it is a beautiful part of the world. But the families of Russell and Carol got concerned when they hadn't heard from them in a while. Now, you have to understand, in Australia, phone coverage isn't everywhere, particularly in these isolated areas. So it would have taken a little while to start raising the alarm, because just because you can't contact someone straight away doesn't mean something bad's happened. But they did raise the alarm. But it seemed funny at the time, because a couple of campers go missing. It does make some news, but there was a little detail which no doubt the media loved to jump on, because it was just a tiny bit salacious. Because it turns out that Russell and Carol weren't in a permanent relationship. In fact, Russell's wife was back at home. And it turns out that Russell and Carol used to be high school sweethearts. They'd reconnected later, and they decided to just carry on a relationship unbeknownst to many people, and they would go off camping together. So I remember saying, well, you sort of hope something really bad's happened, because otherwise old Bud's going to be in a lot of trouble when he gets home. But then they showed the campsite, and that little bit of humour in the situation disappeared real quick. Because as you see in the picture, it was burnt out, Lynn. That someone had gone to a lot of trouble to do something there. And so the suggestion was made that perhaps these two have decided they will go off together and start a new life. Just get away from everyone. But both families said that just wouldn't be the case. They were too connected to their families and to their communities. It's not something that conceivably they would have done. And yes, it soon turned out to be an absolute tragedy. The police said, we are now looking at this as a homicide. And straight away, they were very sure who at least had been responsible for the disappearances of these two people. So whilst they hadn't found the bodies, they knew that they were not going to find them alive. But right now, we do have to extend the sympathies to the Hill family and the Clay family. Because yes, they did meet their demise whilst they were out there camping. But yes, they were honing in on Greg Lynn. Now, he spent a lot of time up in this high country. He would go out hunting mostly, and he was licensed and so forth, all the licenses for the guns. But he loved the isolation, getting away from everything. But why they suspected him was because there was a snapshot of a vehicle that just happened to be leaving the area around the time this couple disappeared. And they had a little bit more evidence that they held back. But they did release to the media, hey, we're looking for this vehicle. And then they went and bugged his house and his car and probably everything else. And then they listened to him for 16 months. They still had not found the bodies. And it was still in the media as, well, what's happened to these two people? Are they still just missing? Where will they be found? But the police did go knock on Greg Lynn's door and said, hey, buddy, we know you go up to the high country. Did you ever come across this couple? And he's like, nope, never saw them. And it's said that he acted very cool, very calm about the situation. Well, it was after 16 months and they're listening to these conversations, he does make reference to this couple and the police decide now is the time to move on in. And they take him down to the Sale police station. This is where it gets quite fascinating because in that first moment when they take him down to interrogate him, he maintains his story. He never ran into them. But then they dropped this one piece of information that had never been released. And they said, we actually pinged Russell Hill's phone in the location of where your vehicle was on your way out of the camping area. So how could his phone get in your vehicle? Now, it was that piece of information that led Greg Lynn to confess, we will say, to the crime. So I'm now going to play a snapshot of this confession/interrogation video showing what led up to the incident and how the incident unfolded in his own words. So sit back and watch.
But I could hear this buzzing sound. I stepped on a bee's hive or a wasp nest or something. They were all around, but I couldn't see any.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know what it was. I was scratching my head. I was wearing a hat. So figuratively speaking, scratching my head, didn't know what it was. It disappeared. Continued walking down. And then I heard this sound again. What is that? I looked around. No, I haven't stepped on anything. It was really loud. I couldn't figure out what it was. And I looked up and there was a bloody drone right above my head. And that was bizarre. And then as I looked up, I only had gaze of it for a couple of seconds and then whoosh, and it was like gone.
Yep.
All right, what's this all about? So I came back to the camp, crossed over the river, not by the swinging bridge, and
It's not overly deep there.
No, you just quickly wade across. And it's getting late in the afternoon by this stage, and as I come into the, so it's just on dinner time, as I come into the camp, look, I didn't know where this drone was from, but as I come into the camp, where I was, unloaded rifle, but still in hand, this guy walks out over to here, on the other side of his car,
Mm-hmm.
the controller in hand, drone sitting on the ground, zips the drone up, and it just hovers there for about 10 seconds, straight back down, puts it under his arm, and took it back to his camp. I thought, what the hell is this? What's going on?
Mm-hmm.
Drones are cameras.
Yeah,
flying
of course,
cameras.
yeah.
And so I didn't go and confront him over this straight away. I sat down and I just thought about it for a while. What's this all about? And I was getting my dinner ready. Then I decided to go and find out what this drone incident is all about. So I walked up there, unarmed, and I asked him why he was using the drone, and he said that he didn't like deer hunters, and that he had some video footage of me now hunting, close to the camp. And I said I wasn't. I was right up the valley, but he's got pictures of me with the rifle in hand, close to the camp, and that he was going to take those pictures to the police. And I said that's just ridiculous. And he said, well, I could just say that you shot through the camp. And I didn't. But so I think the whole purpose of it was he just wanted me to go.
Yeah.
Anyway, went back to my camp, had my dinner, and yes, I was annoyed, didn't do anything about it, but I did turn the stereo up and played some loud music, which is a bit of a childish thing to do. And yeah, just annoying that he's going to annoy me like that. Just to annoy him back. Anyway, I had the doors on my patrol open and playing the loud music. And it was now dark, and I had my rifle packed away in the bag. I also had with me a Barathram Arms straight bull shotgun, which was also in its bag, and the ammunition for that was in the front seat, just sitting on the front seat. And it was later that night, it was after a couple of hours, I could hear some rustling around, and I looked up and I could see Mr. Hill walking away from the car. He had the Barathram shotgun in his hands, and he had the magazine, which foolishly I had loaded there, and he walked back to his car, which was parked here.
Not looking at anything and just listening to what you were saying. Is the gun that he's taken from your car still in the bag?
No, it's out. So I'm sitting down here around the fire, and he's come up like so, and he's taken the shotgun out of the rear door. He's got the ammunition, both doors were open, so I was trying to annoy him with the music, in the magazine from the front seat, which is foolish, and I've broken the law. In that case, I should have had him locked up. He's come back here to his car, around this side he was standing.
When you say at that side, is that can you put like a V for the front, like the front of a vehicle? So
okay, front, rear, and mine is front, rear.
Yep.
And I came around here and I confronted him, give it back, what are you doing? And he said he's going to take that to the police with him. And then when I advanced towards him, he had the magazine in the shotgun at this stage. He pulled the action back and he let a couple of rounds go into the air. I immediately ran around the back here, fearing that I might be going to cop the next one, and I waited. It was in shadow around here and it was dark. I didn't want to run back towards my car, because if he was going to shoot me, then he would have had a clear shot. I then hear Mr. Hill coming around this side of the car, and so I kept under the shadow and I moved in closer, again fearing that if I ran this way I'd cop another one. I saw the barrel of the shotgun appear over the bonnet, and to try and disarm him, I jumped up, I grabbed the shotgun barrel with my right arm, pivoted around so I was facing him facing away from the bonnet of the car. I had the left hand on the stock, right hand on the barrel, and we wrestled. The shotgun was pointed over this way, and it was discharged. My hand was not on the trigger, it was on the barrel. Right hand, left hand on the stock, pushing up against him, you wouldn't let it go, it discharged. It went through the left hand rear view and killed Miss Clay dead. She was shot through the head. I saw her in the peripheral. I didn't actually see which way she was standing, but when later she was laying face down on the ground.
Yep.
Immediately, Russell Hill let go of the shotgun, and I took the shotgun straight back to the car. There was another round in the shotgun. I just discharged that to get rid of it straight away, moved the action, fired it up into the air, threw the gun into the bag, magazine out, magazine on the floor, and shut both doors, turned the music off. So he couldn't get at it again. As I turned around and coming back this way, in the meantime he had been with Miss Clay. He advances towards me with a knife in his right hand and a fist clenched in his left. He first takes a swing with his left hand. I blocked that. With his right hand he takes a swing with the knife. I grabbed his wrist and with my left arm pulled over his right, and he pushed me over back onto the ground, and the knife went into his chest. We rolled over and I got off him. He crawled a little bit and then he stopped medically.
Now, as you notice, the police aren't fully buying that story. It was quite a controlled telling of the events, and we will state that only the survivor gets to tell that story. If either Russell or Carol had survived, no doubt the story would be different, in my opinion. But he's had a fair bit of time to come up with his version of events, and we will get back to that. At trial, his defense lawyers say, well, the police were oppressive. And they say oppressive because they said the way they questioned him and forced him into admitting what he did was not right. Because without that confession, they actually had nothing. The police probably could not have brought the charges forward. Just that one detail of the phone. Well, you could probably explain that away. But Greg Lynn, in that whole confession video, and you've got to, if you want to, go and watch it. It's over 3 hours, and I found it absolutely fascinating. But he does say, yeah, I made some terrible choices. Because why didn't he? Now, if his version there that you just watched was true, why would you not go straight to the police and say, look, something absolutely terrible has happened. Yeah, I'm going to be in trouble for this, but, it's not what it looks like. But no, what Greg Lynn decided to do, and you'll see in that confession video the reasons as to why he took this action. He actually spells out why he did what he did next. So he gets rubber gloves on. He loads up the campsite and burns everything to remove any evidence at all. And then over the course of the next year, in between lockdowns and so forth, he'd taken the bodies away in his trailer, and then he dumped them somewhere, burnt them, and it said basically pulverise them so you would not find any remains. You might just find a little bit. And then, because the vehicle was all in the media, he decides to repaint it. And then when they're still showing the vehicle, he took his little rooftop canopy off the vehicle also to hide the fact that that was the vehicle that they were looking for. So all of this was done over the course of that 16 months. Now, as regards the actual incident as he described it, I'd be interested to know what your thoughts are on this, but for me, I find it a challenge, and I did have to ask a couple of people who understand guns, because I don't at all. So first, question, would you take a shotgun hunting? And the general consensus is no, not for deer, because you're just too far away and the shot spreads out. And I said, but hang on, no. He said he had to use solid shot for hunting deer. They go, okay, well then you might use a shotgun, but you got to get awful close. But that's not to say that he went out there intentionally to start shooting people as such. But that was just a little detail I thought was of note, that was the shotgun that was available at the time, a close range weapon when you were camping relatively close to people. But it's a single action, which means that each time you need to do something to load it up. Now, he does explain that he did that. Well, not he, but that Russell had loaded it. But his friend, Carol, was crouching down and she got shot. Now, you see that in movies. People are struggling over a weapon and the innocent bystander gets shot. The chances of that happening, I find quite unlikely myself. I mean, it could happen. I'm not saying it couldn't have happened, but it's hard enough, I think, to shoot a target when you're aiming, let alone to randomly shoot someone instantly dead. But then the next description of what happened to Russell and the struggling over the knife and then the falling, he's falling backwards, remember? So Greg Lynn's falling backwards and the knife ends Russell's life very, very quickly. And again, you see that in movies. You see people struggling and you don't know who's been stabbed. And it's always the person you least expect would be. Again, I know it can happen, so I'm not saying it didn't happen, but you've got two very unlikely circumstances that happened in a very short space of time. Well, this did go to trial, and the jury brought back their verdict. They said, not guilty of the murder of Russell Hill, but guilty of manslaughter. But they found him guilty of the murder of Carol Clay. Now, I was not in the court. I'm not aware of every single piece of evidence or how they came up with that verdict, but it did surprise a lot of people and disappointed the Hill family particularly. They're saying, how did he not get convicted of murder of him? And I do raise that as a question. The way he describes it in that full confession video, when you watch it, he says he didn't have his hand on the trigger when Carol was shot. So, guilty of murder, when, if you believe that side of the story, that would be more manslaughter at the very worst. But when they're struggling over the knife, perhaps there was more intent there than just manslaughter. But I don't know. But I don't see how they came up with that split verdict. And it is safe to say that the Hill family have expressed their disappointment over that particular outcome. But sentencing hasn't happened yet. That will happen at the end of July 2024. And no doubt there will be more to this story. And just as a side note, Greg Lynn's first wife was found dead outside the family home many years previous to this, when they were going through a bit of a nasty divorce. Well, the Victorian police have reopened that case. They're now looking at that a little bit more closely, which is not to cast any shadow over this bloke at all, but I do think that's fairly standard procedure when someone gets convicted of a serious crime. They sort of look back through and just check that everything was, I'd say, above board previous to this. And yes, when the police were listening to him for that 16 months, they said that he showed misogynistic, racist and homophobic views. However, I would say this, if anyone listened to me for 16 months and all my ramblings, I'd hate to think how they would portray me, and maybe I would be dragged off and put into a prison, who knows. But what do you think of this particular case? Do you think justice has been done fully? Well, let us know down there in comments. But thank you very much for watching. If you like this sort of thing, make sure you hit that subscribe button. I'm Owen, you've been watching The Pub Test, and we will see you on the next one.